Welcome to Birdsong. I'm your host, Kayuta Kiora, and in this week's episode, we have Thomas Sochowicz joining us. Thomas has an interesting bio, and as he puts it, his first memory was writing down a ray of plasma light from a star into this realm when he was born. His first notable initiation was when he was 7 or 8 years old via Carlos Castaneda's A Fire from Within, and this led him to the study of nature and various esoteric lineages via books on Buddhism, music, Hinduism, alchemy, astrology, shamanism, science, occultism, and many others. After high school, he went through a harder life initiated by the streets of Detroit and the underground festival culture. And from there, he ended up spending significant time in hermitage for meditation, retreat, initiation with teachers, elders, in particular through the Red Road, and other branches of self-work. In February 2020, this year, he had his third major near-death experience, which we talk about in this show, alongside many other fascinating themes as we springboard from there, such as Celtic Druidic shamanism, entheogens, the hidden serpents of wisdom, our plasma body evolution into the Aquarian age. We touch on Atlantis. We unpack this concept of the 13th dimensional memory complex and a lot of other esoteric threads woven throughout the heart of our dialogue. And somehow Thomas has a way of tying this all in together in a very articulate way so that we can gain an understanding of where we are and where we are headed. And I really enjoyed this dialogue, and I really trust that there's going to be some gold in this one if you are tuning in. So I won't keep you waiting. Let's get straight into it. Thanks for being here, and I trust you'll find value in our dialogue to carry with you on your own path forward. Thanks for being here with me today, and I'm really looking forward to exploring many of these interesting topics that you have presented me with. But before that, as I mentioned to you, I would love to invite you to share something in relation to opening up our space together, which is essentially a space for intentional dialogue and a space where we can open up a small portal in time for us to recognize or remember what it means to honor the sacred. So if there are any words or offerings that you might typically make when opening up ritualistic or ceremonial or sacred space, the invitation is certainly here to share something from the heart in relation to this greater theme of honoring the sacred.
Thank you so much. I mean, on that note, I just always want to honor, first of all, you for having me on here in this space and audience and just the whole cultivation that you're working with and everything that's brought you here into this moment for us to be able to share, because whatever situations in our life have kind of drawn this together, I can only imagine the beautiful things that have kind of culminated to you coming here in front of me in this moment. So I want to honor that first and foremost, and anybody out there who is listening to this, like, thank you so much for sharing in this sacred space for us, especially in this moment in the world that we have going on. It's very, our time is very interesting, and the moments that we spend with other people and other spaces to cultivate energy are very, very important. So thanks to anyone who's listening to this as well. And then I just want to really honor, the earth, all my personal guides, the four directions. I would like to call in any and all benevolent beings that want to support us, that maybe want to come through any of us. Would also like to call in anybody that is on any timeline that's going to end up listening to this message, to also to be present and connect in, so that the things that we share can be things that are personally relevant to you and the medicine that you need at this moment in your life. And may this transition in transmission ripple out into the collective in a way that is just the exact perfect thing that needs to be shared through this transmission. Aho.
Aho to that, Thomas. A lovely way to open up our dialogue together. And as I was just saying to you before we started this conversation formally. I love the way that you articulate yourself, and I'm really looking forward to getting into some of these topics, mate. And by the looks of things, you have quite an interesting story to share. And one of the things that caught my attention in particular was that you were involved in an accident at the start of CV19, a car accident. And afterwards, you received a healing from a woman known as Sara Eaglewoman from a line of Apache and Toltec healers. And from what I remember, she ended up doing a soul grid reconstruction on you / for you, which then led to the awakening or the reawakening of certain spiritual gifts, which includes what you articulate or reference as the 13 collectives of the Pheonix, and a remembrance of your connection to this particular Celtic Druid lineage. And I would love for you to unpack some of this to build some context, not only for me, but also for our listeners as well. So perhaps somewhere to start might be giving us a bit of your story leading up to the accident or before the accident, and then this shift into this new level of spiritual awareness with this soul grid reconstruction and what that entailed, and then we can start to transition into some of these other themes.
Totally, yeah, that would be great. Thank you. So, you know, before this experience that you're speaking of in February, I did have quite an extensive background into spirituality still, all sorts of different esoteric lineages in study, and you know, even many different lifetimes and past lifetimes and things of that nature. However, you know, previous to this accident, I was extremely focused on human design, on astrology, on and also what I call immersive experience design. I was essentially working on taking and creating kind of like an interactive live production of electronic music and visuals and things of that nature, because I do have experience in all those areas and things like that.
I did see that on your website.
Yeah, and so when this accident came through, very interesting sets of like synchronicities and interesting details around the accident itself, which I won't get into. All very like synchro-mystical, you know, is the kind of term that I like to use.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think the first time I heard that was maybe Santos Bonacci or something like that. Synchro-mysticism, I think he called, or syncretism is what he calls it. But anyway, so yeah, went through this accident, and you know, it was definitely like a near-death experience. There wasn't like any serious injury, but definitely like we are really lucky to be alive, in the sense of like, you know, a lot of very interesting things. In even the moment of the accident itself, it was I was like staring the driver in the eye as we like came to a screeching halt. This very, very like powerful kind of like moment, and we both were extremely aware that there was like spiritual angelic forces that kind of like protected the event. And a day or so later, Sara Eaglewoman, who you mentioned, she had already kind of been scheduled to come in and do not only some grid work in the area, some Olympias on some buildings, and also personal sessions for people that I was connected to. And she did my session, and essentially the way that she had put it to me is that due to my extreme sensitivity as a young child, you know, because certain aspects of these gifts, I guess you could say, have always been there, but they have also at this point like evolved immensely in a number of ways. But in that state as a child, which I do remember now, thankfully, because of some of the work that we did together, it's extremely sensitive child psychospiritually. and essentially started to collect trauma in programming, conditioning, things of this nature from people in my environment or people I would interact with, because I wasn't aware that I had the gifts. And so it's just kind of like, because this is just the way that my system operates, it was just something that was happening, and I had no conceptual understanding of what was going on. And so she wiped that all clear, essentially, bringing my energy body back to kind of like a zero state, almost like, you know, a childlike state again, which was very interesting in many senses. But when all of that stuff cleared out, it took maybe almost even like a full month of a lot of mostly alone time to really even kind of like gain my bearings in terms of like who I was and what was going on, because so much that I had accumulated and that was motivating me in a lot of different ways wasn't even my own. It was just things that I had collected along the way, that had belonged to friends or loved ones or other people.
Mm.
And so there were a lot of similarities, I guess I would say, or there are a lot of similarities in terms of my life and the things that I'm into and things that I'm doing, but also the direction is vastly different in that, the systems that I was using, human design, astrology, a lot of different systems that I had studied, have now taken on a sort of relationship as kind of like a crystal or something, right? It's like, where at one time it was something that created my entire worldview and energy filtered through these systems. Now they become more like something that I'm like, oh, okay, like this stone has a specific purpose and I use it for something. I can pick it up for a couple minutes and put it away. Where the overall scope of what I've been interacting with is now much more expanded in sort of real time and updating in moment to moment or day by day and all of these different things. So and one of the first things that came through was that the experience that I was developing actually now wanted to become much more organic and much more, even, I guess I would say, rooted in earth level ceremony, medicine type of ceremony, rather than more, I guess I would say, theatrical in certain senses.
Hmm.
So that's been a big part of reintegration. And immediately after this event, I was sent to utilize these gifts that I had been developing in not only doing work on individuals, okay, because like I said, so this ability to kind of dive into somebody's energy body or empathically, psychically tune into their system. I This also includes a sort of ability to dive into their energy body and find trauma, programming, conditioning on this or multiple lifetimes and extract it and transmute it. Okay. Where the best way I can describe this is like, is actually related to how I've been shown that it works in the grid, right? Because this was a new part that nothing that I had ever really done anything like this before, where that same type of work with another individual, they were now immediately sending me to different places on the earth, right?
Mm.
And the way that they're essentially showing it to me is that, like, if you ever heard of this word, it's called ectoplasm, right? It's kind of they use it in like ghostbusters or like movies about, or when they talk about ghosts and things. And so I know that initially is kind of funny, but it's the idea that like a ghost is made out of a substance, right? And this substance is called ectoplasm. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're sending me these different places on the grid, there's literally playing out in my psycho, in my third eye, in my energy body. There's literally like battles playing out that had happened in specific sites in the earth, and they're showing me it in real time as if it was still happening in this moment. And just like we as a person, via our upbringing and situations that happen, get trauma and things like that in our body, the same thing happens with the earth. Okay, when there are battles, wars, very traumatic events and things, if nothing gets done to these places on the earth, a lot of times there's this actual trauma from the events that just stays anchored. um
That's really interesting. Yeah, as above, so below, as within, so
Totally.
without. Yeah, yeah. Looking at it from that
Exactly.
lens of perspective, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And um, so essentially what goes on is that these stuck things within our body, or like let's say the earth grid, are kind of like this ectoplasm. It's kind of like dead light in a way, or like dense, kind of almost like it's not dead as in like um for forever dead, but it's kind of like stuck and crystallized and sort of stagnant, right?
Mm.
It's like not flowing in a proper motion. It's kind of like a scab on your skin, or something to that effect.
Hmm.
And so what they're having me do is essentially reorganize this and transmute this into free flowing plasma that is actually something that is the interesting thing about this state, though. And this relates to this, the Pheonix collective that you had asked me about.
Mm.
So the original energy for the auric field, right, that we have when we, let's say we're born, before we're receiving the programming, the trauma and conditioning, uh, is living plasma, but it's not actually the same as the plasma that goes through this process of going under, of going through trauma and these things that happen to us. It actually allows an evolution to the energy to happen to go through those states, where going through that transmutation process actually brings it into an even higher dimensional frequency, if the proper work is done to it, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, man. So when you're talking about these 13 collectives of the Phoenix, is this related to what I'd also seen you reference as the 13th dimensional memory complex? What's the link here?
Yeah, so the best way I can explain this is that so most people that may have heard this term before, collective memory complex. This is a term that comes from, at least the first time I had ever heard of it was with a material called the Raw Law of One material. Okay, is a book, and a bunch of audios. There's even groups around the states and different places. People come together to talk about this material, but it's essentially a channeled material from what's known as a collective memory complex. And the idea of a collective memory complex is that uh, a species, for example, right, like all of the experiences that a species has uh, actually get stored in a sort of essentially would get stored in the DNA material and amass, just like we have a brain, right? The species itself has a collective memory complex that stores and evolves over time,
Mm.
right?
Hmm. You could think of it like the internet for humans, or internet for the species, or we could just reference something like Rupert Sheldrake's work with morphic resonance or morphic fields.
Totally. Morphogenetic field,
Mm.
100%. I'm glad that you brought that to my attention, because that word perfectly encompasses a lot of what I'm speaking about. And so there's a morphogenetic field for the human species. Okay, now these types of morphogenetic fields keep on stacking and sort of transcending and including as we go out. And it's not so much hierarchical as it is heterarchical, although there is also some inherent hierarchy that it works into it as well. But so now if we look at the collective memory complex of humanity, there's also collective memory complexes of planets, of stars, of solar systems, of galaxies, of universes. Okay, so these collective complexes keep on growing exponentially. Okay, and essentially what has been shared to me about the collective memory complex of the 13-dimensional Pheonix is that there are many galaxies and universes, and all of the species contained within these galaxies and universes, a lot of which, some of them don't even have biological life forms. They can be, interdimensional beings. And these beings of many different universes have came together into a sort of treaty, let's say, or let's call it like a covenant or an agreement. And they've come together in this agreement through our genetic system on this planet, through humans' genetic system. And they've done this because there's a unique way that our genetic system operates, in a way that it has meant to, or is meant to, access a very multidimensional nature, right? In a certain manner, our body is a microcosm to this universe. And because of that aspect to our biological vehicles, it gives us the ability to actually access multiple timelines, multiple spaces, multiple dimensions and universes in a very unique way. And so essentially all of these collective memory complexes have come together to assist in our genetic evolution and the genetic evolution of this planet, in order for all of these different species and memory complexes to have a place where they can come together and unify and share different experiences, and actually share in a much larger evolution that's going on in multiple universes and various dimensions and timelines.
Wow. Okay. There's a couple of questions here I got for you. Firstly, why the Pheonix? Why the name Pheonix? Why is that linked into this? Why 13 dimensions? And thirdly, I'm interested to know what your thoughts are when it comes to these perhaps inherent capacities that we have as human beings to explore these realities, or to explore these states of consciousness, and if you think that it is something that is inherent to all human beings, and that we have gained this cloud of conditioning over us through all of the trauma, all of the patterns of programs that we experience from an early age, even intergenerationally, or if this is something that is gifted to certain individuals, or can this be cultivated through certain practices and techniques? What's your thoughts on this?
So let's see, where do I start with that? What was the first question?
Why Pheonix and why 13 dimensions?
So the Pheonix, the reason that the word Pheonix is chosen in this sense is because when we get to the layer of building universes in galaxies and things of that nature, the beings that are operating on the level of, let's almost say, kind of like dreaming universes into existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have these very kind of large plasma bodies, right? Like even if you've seen a picture of a galaxy or a nebula or something like this, there's a sort of energy, a plasma energy that is at work when it's swirling around and it's moving through these different areas, and literally being the substance that allows for the creation of these different things to take place. And so this, in one sense, is very much like a dragon phoenix, right? Like it does have some sort of connection to what are called seraphim. Okay, you can look into material like the Sophia Code, right? And all of these things are connected and they're related to similar vibratory fields. And the other reason that the Phoenix is chosen is because a major part in this evolution being able to happen through our genetic systems has to do with the fact that so many people on this planet right now are operating based around Phoenician languages. Okay, so the English or Anglish or angelish language, okay, actually originally was handed down and created by a group known as the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians, of course, the word Phoenician comes from the word phoenix. And there actually was an intention in the creation of this language because the way that language works, right, is language is essentially a software program within our hardware, let's say, our biological hardware, okay? So languages actually play a very, very large part in the creation of the reality in which we live. It's literally like our energy body spins through the shape of the language and then vibrationally is rippling out and creating or co-creating the reality that we are part of. It sort of spins, the language sort of spins just like a program does on a hard drive or a disk drive, and it spins within our chakra systems in our bodies, and it's affecting the way that the reality gets perceived or interacted with. Now, this language was very limiting to a lot of the aspects of the different systems that were already in place on this earth, right? But it was also created in a way where the limitation was meant to, over time, sort of strengthen the abilities and sort of pressurize the energy in kind of like an alchemical fashion, so that once we as humanity and certain beings no longer fit within the framework, once the energy could no longer be contained within the system, that it would sort of explode and burst through and rise up like a phoenix, right? And the way that this happens has a lot to do with synchronizing the heart and the mind, okay? So literally being able to bring the heart into a state of what's known as coherence, right? And through this heart coherence, we actually realize that there is many, many more languages or even like a direct cognition that comes to be present, where we can interact with other individuals, humans, plants, animals, all these different things in not only a psychic capacity, an empathic capacity, but there are also many different languages that are possible and present.
So let's get back onto the number 13 in a second, but since we're talking about plasma, I've heard you talk about the plasma body evolution, and I feel as though this ties into your knowledge when it comes to Aquarian age astrology or cosmology. And I'm wondering if there is a succinct way for us to tie some of this in, because from this astrological perspective, this is the direction that we're heading into the Aquarian age. So I'm wondering if you can deconstruct these terms for us to a greater degree. And I'm also wondering how you think people can best prepare, how we can best prepare ourselves as we head into what astrology tells us is a new age that we are transitioning into.
Totally. Yeah. So Aquarius is known as the water bearer. Okay. And interestingly enough, it is the only zodiac sign that has a human as the zodiac symbol, right? So the zodiac literally comes from the word zoo, which has to do with the anthropomorphization, or the different animals that are present in the constellations and in the zodiac and things like that. And of course, Aquarius is the only one that's, some people call humans animals, in which a lot of senses we are. And we are also something quite a bit different and sort of more evolved in certain ways, I guess you would say. I don't want to like get into some sort of disagreement or altercation about like, putting us on a higher or lower level or anything like that. But like in different ways, our biological systems have certain other capabilities. And I mean, yeah, I don't want to go down that whole rabbit hole anyway. Mm-hmm. But essentially, there is a certain level of culmination of many species, not just animals, but also many different interdimensional species that are coming together within the human body. And so really the Aquarian age, so Aquarius is also ruled by the planet Uranus. Okay. Uranus is synonymous with electricity, is synonymous with ascension. Aquarius and Uranus are synonymous with the idea of aliens, right? And so all these different sort of ideas are very Aquarian in nature. And so what else is really interesting, though, is Aquarius, although the picture is the water bearer, Aquarius is an air sign. It's not a water sign, right? Which always, when I initially found out astrology, I was kind of like, why is it the water bearer? If it's an air sign, it just kind of like always sort of messed with me a little bit on a mental level. What I've now realized is that the water is actually more of a plasma than it is a water. Of course, it's still water, but the thing is about water is actually water is a very interesting substance in that there's a lot of things about water that science cannot fully explain. Okay. And this is admittedly so if you get into a lot of like physics and quantum physics and different things. You can look into like Emoto's work on water and things of that nature.
Absolutely.
But so there's this interesting aspect of bringing an electrical type of frequency like Uranus, right? This ascension electricity type of energy into the idea of water and air in a way where this sort of like it's like water that's more flowing with electricity in it, right? So this is very much so like hydrogen, or something that suns are made out of, or something that you could find a mass at the center of a galaxy, right? But this is still very much so in a lot of ways like a liquid, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can go back to the human body and see that we have blood plasma, right? And now I've had people argue with me before. They're like, well, blood plasma is so much different than the plasma that's up in the cosmos or whatever. Is like, yes and no. Like, if you're not looking at through the lens of the above so below type of phenomena, then yes, there are a lot of differences. But now if we start to change the vibrational field of the sun, in its frequencies changing as we go through different spaces in the galaxy, right? Because that's part of what's going on right now too. Since 2012, we've been transitioning to below the galactic equator to above the galactic equator, right? So of course that's going to change a lot of stuff, and this is stuff science will admit too, right? We're in a what's called as a solar minimum, right? So this is affecting the magnetic fields around the planet and around the sun. There's lots of changes going on a cosmic level, and these changes affect our DNA. They affect our nervous systems. They affect our blood in all of these different things. So really what's happening at this point is the sort of culmination of a lot of different layers and pieces that are leading up to kind of a peak state in human evolution, right? And in this sense, this is why you could see the water bearer as being the human, right? It's like we're finally hitting some sort of pinnacle in the evolution of the zodiac, right?
So I was just going to jump in here and say you're touching on this peak state, but is it not necessarily a peak state that we haven't been at before, taking into account the cyclical nature of all things and going back to these notions of the Atlanteans or the Lemurians, which people speak of with their high states of consciousness? Are we coming to a place where we are revisiting these states of consciousness we can have access to?
Sure. In certain senses, there is always going to be a return, right? And certain abilities that have been had before by different beings on this planet are definitely a return, right?
It's more of a spiral, though. That's the sense I'm getting at. It's a returning, but it's also expanding to something different.
Right, and that's what's always important to really recognize is the spiral within all of this as well, because that spiral really has so much to do with in a lot of ways like the evolutionary kind of like Christic force, you could say, or some may attribute it to like Gaia Sophia and this type of energy that's always although we're spinning, we're always kind of ascending to some higher level too, and transcending and including in one way or another.
So to wrap this up, I'm getting the sense that, okay, we're going through all these astrological, cosmological changes, and our physical vessel is also going through an evolution to match that, as above, so below. So what is it that we can do to prepare ourselves for this plasma body evolution that we are transitioning into and through?
Yeah, sure. I love bringing it down to the the more like direct and practical aspects of everything. Literally the main thing that I'm shown on a daily level to work on is going into our systems and essentially, as one might say in the spiritual crowd, doing the work, right? We all have stuff from our families, from our childhoods, from past lives, from lovers, and all of these different things that kind of culminate in our system. And the more that we get into actually doing that work and facing the pains and the traumas and not just pushing through them, but actually like getting into the meat of the substance in our energy bodies and allowing our systems to come to more of a neutral state so this energy can continue to flow freely is one of the main things that we can do. And definitely in this process, nature has just been, something that's been shown to me as absolutely essential on so many levels, whether that's, going out and grounding and earthing, getting clean water, as much as we can in this day and age, going out to different points that we feel called to on the earth, whether that be, just someplace beautiful, or a lake or a stream or a vortex, depending on how sensitive you are and different energies, going out and getting sunlight, just being in nature and really connecting with these different things in nature is something that I've seen to be hugely important, because it's essentially in those different types of places that we get the frequencies and the updates, whether it's through plants, whether it's through just direct sunlight, whether it's through the air. Any of these different things are vastly important to ensuring that our systems get the updates really that they need to get.
So the way that I'm thinking about it is we're doing the work and we're essentially allowing ourselves to become, as the shamans of old might articulate, as a hollow bone or a clear vessel, an empty chalice, so that the energies from nature can come through us with clarity. And to wrap it all back into this question that I asked you in the beginning, but I didn't articulate it very well, it was surrounding this notion that humans have been endowed with these interesting capacities for consciousness exploration and viewing all of these amazing states of reality on an intergalactic level. So if we are doing this work, and as we are going into this new stage of human evolution, planetary evolution, to answer my own question, I think I would say that it's not necessarily exclusive. It's inclusive to all humans if we are willing to do the work and as we go through this organic, natural evolution as a species.
100%. And something I feel called to share about on that, and that notion too, is, a big part, it's not just staying clear, although that is a huge part of it. I also want to say too, when we really get to a certain level of clarity, at least my experience, and it feels to be true with others, there is something truly kind of magical that starts to happen, right? When there's a certain level of clearing that gets done, there is something very like unique and personal that starts to happen for individuals in whether that be messages that come in, whether that be certain callings that come in. And really this allows us, this starts to come in through being able to tap into a certain frequency within. And this is also partially related to what I was talking about with Aquarius too, is, there's this kind of frequency that we could just call like a bliss, right? And I don't necessarily mean like bliss is in some sort of disconnected kind of like out there, overwhelmed with pleasure, something of that effect, although that can be part of it, right? Mm-hmm. What this is really more so like a frequency where there's a certain level of clearing that takes place, where we've kind of like reached a certain interesting kind of like inner source frequency in a way, right? And this frequency essentially empowers our inner magician or our inner shaman or our inner goddess, or whatever terms that we want to use. And is this frequency that really allows us to kind of almost like be at play with our reality, be at play with the universe, but in a way that it is with the experience and wisdom of an adult. So it's childlike instead of childish.
Yeah, I love that articulation. Another word that came to my mind was the very word that Eliade used in his very landmark book, Shamanic Techniques of Ecstasy. So ecstasy could be another word that we might put in there. And I totally feel you on that as well. It's certainly not a lost in the clouds type of feeling. It's a very grounded type of feeling. And to to wrap up everything that we're talking about, because I asked it in the beginning, and some listeners might be hanging on, waiting for you to answer that question. Is it of how much relevance do we want to place on this number 13? I'm curious about why 13 dimensions.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I keep spacing on it, I think, as well. So the 13 is related to that, actually in the zodiac wheel. And actually, there's a really amazing friend of mine. Her name is Allison Engel, and you can look her up on Facebook. She recently wrote a book about this. I believe it's called Intrinsically, Unequivocally Human. If I mess that up, it's that's part of the title. And it's like the quantum psychology of depth astrology. It's an amazing book, but essentially, each one of the 12 signs of the zodiac is a dimension. Okay, so we have 1 through 12 being the 12 dimensions. Okay, and then the 13 is the creator, the individual, right? And so this template isn't just true in our specific, let's say, solar system, right? This idea of 13 dimensions actually happens all the way up to the universal level. And there is a certain sort of, again, a transcending and including as we digest different layers of the trauma and the programming conditioning we have in our systems. And as that plasma becomes more and more free flowing in our energy body, there's a certain sort of threshold that's reached as we tap into that sort of bliss frequency as a co-creator. And that has to do with the 13th dimension, which puts the individual in the driver's seat as a co-creator, and thus tapping them into a place that's actually synonymous on an individual, on a micro scale of these universal creator beings. Now, that being said, there's also simultaneously an overall evolution that happens where we still go through an evolutionary process up to that level, right? So that's again the micro and macro. And I do also want to say that there are dimensions beyond this, but they have to do with things that are outside of the universal matrix. And they are things that I haven't found to be that relevant in chatting about. But specifically, the 13-dimensional collective of the Pheonix is one that is involved in the direct co-creative evolution with our human species, and is playing a big part in this transition that we are going through into the Aquarian. Does that put it in perspective?
It does. I'm trying to conceptualize where I want to take the conversation next, if I want to keep going down that path, because I feel like there's still so much to unpack there, and we could keep deepening into it. Actually, what I would love to do, maybe we can save that for another conversation at another time, but I would love to talk about Celtic Druidic shamanism. So I do not know how to articulate it, and perhaps you can articulate it. The Tuatha De Danann?
De Danann. Okay. So it's very close. Tuatha De Danann. And yes, so I have a lot of Celtic background in my ancestry. And it's very interesting as a kid growing up. I knew very little about what I would just call like indigenous Celtic, Scottish, Irish, that area of the globe. I looked in books and I read things, heard things at school and things of this nature, but a lot of it, even as a kid, felt very, in a lot of ways, inauthentic to me, or like that there was something missing or something hidden. And as I got older and looked into it more and more, I found this to be very true. You know, uh, a lot of different, I guess you would say, ethnicities or different indigenous peoples around the world have had their traditions and information kind of like lost or uh, destroyed even. And what was interesting is I found that the Celtic traditions were actually some of them the worst, in the sense of like how much had been kind of either lost or covered up or hidden or something like that, which as I was growing up was always kind of like heart aching for me in a lot of different ways, because it was something that was important in my family, in the sense that my grandmother had traced our lineage back very, very far. And so this was something, that was very interesting to me. And I was always extremely connected to my grandmother growing up, of all my grandparents. And, uh, you know, I just always felt this intense calling to kind of connect to my roots in terms of spirituality and things of this nature, but just didn't really have a way to. Like I would get books on Druidism and things like that. Like I didn't even really like buy them. I would just like pick them up and flip through them. And at least the ones that I found just didn't really have much that I felt super resonant with, I guess you would say. It just still felt somehow like lacking a lot of meat or certain aspects of authenticity, at least for me. And after this experience that I recently had in February, when I arrived in the Asheville area, I had a Druid spirit start coming to me and interacting with me and teaching me directly. And uh, as I felt into, why this was happening and conversed with his being, it was sharing with me because that in multiple different lifetimes, in different occasions, I had had connections to these lineages, and I had done this work before, and that it was actually like very intentional and very specific, in that I was not able to connect with different levels of it up to this point, because the very interesting thing about Druid teachings and teachings that come from this area of the world is most everything was not written down by these people, right? And that was actually done very intentionally. And I was told that it was done intentionally because there is a certain sort of frequency or an energetic transmission that literally comes from speaking, right? And even in different, in the Keto traditions in South America, in the Bon in Tibetan traditions, in India and Tibet, there's this idea of an oral transmission, right? And I didn't even, up until recently, I didn't even have a conceptualization of that as a thing in Druid lineages. I'd heard of oral transmissions and I'd been part of them, but I had no connection to them with my own background. And so they shared with me that so many of these different teachings that I was interested in were intentionally not written down because because they can be manipulated, B, because they no longer may be relevant, right? Because literally we are inside of like a living, breathing thing that's always changing, is always updating, is always evolving. And so in certain senses, to have something written down, while you can write things in a way where you can experience them multidimensionally, like the Emerald Tablets of Thoth or something like that, there's still something that's going to inherently be lost by not being able to be updated in a moment-to-moment fashion and get that sort of direct transmission. And so this has been a huge part of my process also since since this experience in February, is going out into this land here where I'm at in Asheville in North Carolina, which also has tons of Celtic background. It has tons of Druid connection here. and also connections to Atlantis as well. And what's interesting about this is also that, you know, you had said before the show that you may be interested in getting into this idea of the return of the serpents of wisdom. And in many different cultures around the world, when you get to the roots of, you know, I studied with a Quero elder in the Andes in Peru, and I've talked to Mexicas in Mexico and other elders from Colombia. And when you get back into more of these oral traditions of history, there's literally handed down from people to people memory of coming from Atlantis, right? Of maybe not necessarily calling it Atlantis, although now that it's more out in kind of like the social, I guess you would say, the social spheres and things like that, many of them will refer to it as Atlantis.
Just like people have adopted the word shamanism for a lot of these nature-based wisdom traditions, yeah. Earth-based cultures. Yeah.
And there is, you know, there is stories that have been handed down generation to generation talking about a flood and then leaving an island and coming to these different places, whether it be Mexico or whether it be Peru or whether it be for the Celtic, it was actually Scotland itself. My ancestors, there are records that my ancestors have that say that they came to Scotland and Ireland from the east, from the west, not the east, which is contrary to popular tradition, and landed on that island, leaving behind a deluge. And before this deluge, there's evidence in almost every culture of these serpent races, okay? These races that were extremely highly gifted, had many powerful godlike abilities in things of this nature. And this is also something that I have been shared to be directly a part of and connected to these different lineages. And I know in one way or another, I'm not putting myself on some sort of pedestal or anything like that by any means, because anybody that's on this planet has connections to these lineages in one way or another. But more so what I'm getting at is that there's like a remembering happening, at least for me, of specific direct lifetimes where I was involved in things that happened in those places.
Yeah, really interesting. When I first read, you mentioned read that you'd mentioned the serpents of wisdom and the hidden history. One of the first things that came to my mind was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, which is one of the major deities within ancient Mexican, Mesoamerican cultures such as the Maya and the Aztec. But what also came to my mind was the Ouroboros, the alchemical symbol of the snake eating its own tail, which of course represents many things, the cyclical nature of all things, the destruction that is inherent with all things, and so on and so forth. And of course, it also led me on to the many old tales and myths that reference snakes and serpents, and especially if we're getting into shamanic cosmology too, and we're taking a look at the world tree, the cosmic tree, which represents the upper, the middle, and the lower worlds. There is often a snake coiled around the roots or coiled around the tree itself, encircling the tree, consuming its own tail. And one example would be in Norse mythology, where the Ouroboros is consuming itself around Yggdrasil, the great world tree. So I'm certainly interested to hear your take on that as well when it comes to the wisdom of the hidden history of the serpents.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm so glad that you brought that up and pointed that out. Sorry, just getting somebody had just messaged me. I was getting that off of my screen. That was kind of distracting me.
Cool.
So the Ouroboros, right? Literally all of the stuff that we're talking about is connected on every level, because these serpents, right? And so now we're going to get into some interesting sort of fringe argumentative types of things in certain circles and things like that. But like,
Bring it on.
of course, there's also a connection in a lot of ways between the idea of a serpent being and a reptilian being, right? And there's so much like negative press and lore out there when it comes to the idea of reptilians and things of this nature. And I'm not necessarily saying that all of that is wrong, quote unquote, right? But what I do want to say is there is also a definite place for anything and everything that's here. And I mean that in the sense of if Gaia didn't want something to be here, then it wouldn't be here. I mean this in different timelines and levels and things of that nature, right? The Earth very much so has control of what's going on in the evolutionary agenda, I guess you would say, of the planet that we're on. And part of the way that it's been shown to me is that, as you know, there is a reptilian brainstem in humans, right? And this reptilian brainstem, of course, is synonymous with reptilian DNA. And it's interesting because the reptilian part of our brain, what it does is it allows access to our motor function. A lot has to do with like our autonomic nervous system, where things just happen whether or not we want them to. It like keeps our heart beating. It makes sure that we don't fall on our face while we're walking and things of that nature. There is also a certain sort of evolution that can happen, whereas this same portion of our reptilian nature that makes sure that trauma and programming and things of that nature stay working properly, let's say, right? Like, it's like if we were like abused as a child, that reptilian aspect is what stores the trauma in our system, so that every time that somebody looks at us in the same way or swings at us or something like that, we kind of flinch or something, right? Mm-hmm. But it's also that aspect that once we transmute that trauma in that programming, allows us the ability to become co-creators and become multidimensional, be able to transcend time, when we can actually bring ourselves into that state of trance, going into alpha, theta, gamma, things of this nature, right? We have to actually engage or disengage that reptilian aspect of our system to be able to go to those places and levels, right? It's also the area of our brain that essentially keeps the program running, like the words and things like that. In Egypt, there was it is called Sebek or Anubis, right? And Sebek or Anubis was synonymous with the Bronson Wernicke aspect of the brain. And this aspect of the brain is essentially the aspect that accepts commands like a dog, right? And AKA Anubis, and also connects to the reptilian aspect of ourselves, right? So to make sure that the motor nervous system functions keep going repeatedly. Well, it also takes a lot of energy to keep those things in place, right? To like to be stored in that system in a way where we just kind of blindly react to things, especially if we didn't necessarily consciously choose to put that program in there, to put that trauma in there, right? But we can also take command of that aspect of our systems in a way where, so now, and this is actually a lot of what goes on when people are like, I saw this reptilian within this being or something like that, right? A lot of what people are seeing in that state is their own reptilian nature and the trauma that they have is being triggered by another individual, essentially putting them into a victim type of mind state, right? Because they are a victim in that moment because they have some sort of resonant trauma or programming that makes them go into fight or flight, or like a PTSD type of episode where they now see this reptilian aspect of this other being as somebody that has power over them or has control over them or is essentially an all-powerful elite that can dominate them or something like that, right? And I'm not bypassing the reality of that moment, because in that moment, that experience that they're having is 100% real. And there is also a way to transcend that frequency where you become a co-creator and you are no longer in a state of disempowerment from that other being, right? And so now I'm going to rewind it all the way back to, we were talking about these the serpents of wisdom and how they relate to, as you said, aurora borealis. Or no, well, that's what's interesting. Ouroboros and aurora borealis, right? So this is the interesting connection here, right? So within our DNA system, we have blood plasma, right? DNA are serpent spirals, okay? That's what we have going on. And in the ancient traditions of many different cultures, there's the idea of Quetzalcoatl. There's the idea of, Quetzalcoatl, and also the return of the rainbow race, the return of the rainbow serpent. All of these different things are different cultures. What are they all talking about? They're all talking about this evolutionary process that's happening within the human genome. That's literally, we're in the middle of this, is exactly why people are like, oh, the prophecies are coming true. Eagle Condor prophecy, all the prophecies are coming true. That's the thing, is because they've all been tapped into the same thing, which was a memory from these Atlantean Lemurian times that was forgotten. And then these different programs were enacted that seem like oppression, but that were also simultaneously a higher dimensional, higher level of evolutionary intention from Gaia, from the universe, right? To put us in the seat of being these multidimensional, galactic sort of traveling beings, right? On the level of Aurora Borealis, right? Now we're talking about the serpent eating its tail, right? Is essentially when we've got ourselves in this state of continually kind of in these trauma loops, right? These loops of these feedback loops where we're just like I said, running into this reptilian being or something that's like shocking us into the state of flight or flight. But then there's also this other level that we can get into, again, that's the spiral, right? And it's not just the serpent chasing its tail, it's actually two serpents. And this is, something that you can even see like in like the Shipibo. The Shipibo have these tapestries. They do these beautiful pieces of artwork where they have these mandalas of these complex Icaro languages and things like that. And in some of them, you see a serpent chasing another serpent. In some of them, you see them coming up together, right? And so it's just this slight difference of chasing the tail versus becoming a co-creator.
I'm just taking a look back at my tapestry back there, which was Shipibo textile with the serpent on it. Yeah, it's so interesting to tie all of this together and see how it weaves in. And when you were speaking about this evolution that we're going through, I was getting tingles in my body coming up. And obviously you're speaking to one of the ways in which we can assist ourselves going through this evolution, which is through the use of entheogens. And before I would love to ask you about your relationship to entheogens and also the Red Road, is there anything else that you think would be beneficial to touch on when it comes to Celtic or Druidic shamanism? And the reason I'm asking is because there are so many of us with partly or full Irish backgrounds that do get drawn into these other cultures because we don't have a reference point to our bloodline ancestral lineages, because a lot of it has been lost. There isn't a lot of knowledge there. So we see these kind of glimmers or these sparks of the sacred within all of these other cultures, especially cultures that still have that essence of honoring the sacred, in particular through using entheogens. So, there's that that desire to reach out to those cultures and to latch on rather than go, okay, what is my culture and what can I find out about that? And of course, the Druids, they're shrouded in mystery, especially when it comes to a lot of their esoteric and their shamanic knowledge. So is there anything else of importance that you would love to share regarding that right now?
Absolutely, and especially in relation to what you said, in the little bit before about the aurora borealis, and everything. For anybody out there, that wants to get into these connections or feels the type of call to these lineages and everything. First of all, I want to say definitely feel free to reach out to me. I want to put that out there. Second of all, I want to say the number one thing that I can recommend is working directly with trees. Okay. And I say this because, and this is something very powerful that was shown to me as of recently, is that the trees are literally synonymous with stars. Okay. In this as above, so below type of nature, different star systems are related to different species of tree. Okay. And there is literally, it's no mistake that the wand, okay, the wands in the tarot, right? The wands in the tarot are actually alder trees.
Okay.
And sorry, not alder trees, ash trees.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And interesting. I'm in Asheville, right? It's literally a city full of a ton of ash trees. But it was known to be the wand because the ash tree burns the hottest of all the trees. Okay. And there's many complex layers when we get into what the trees are, the purposes that they hold here, what they do, right? They're literally taking and collecting the leaves, are collecting celestial light, drawing it into their system and vibrating out aspects of this reality, right? The leaves are literally like parts of the antenna, and it's also literally the nervous system. I was shown that the tree systems on this planet are the sympathetic nervous system, and the mycelial system is the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's the way that these two things work together. Just like in our system, we have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And so the trees are performing these functions of different moving and bringing in different celestial light and allowing them to be present on the planet. And this is also in part why we saw so much intention of clear cutting so many forests, right? And we saw this movement from like hemp-based paper and clothing and things like that. And all of a sudden we moved into where everything needed to be paper from lumber and things like that, because there was a group of beings on this earth, due to the damage of their psyche and the trauma that they had experienced and things of that nature, that put them in a, let's say, giving them an agenda to wipe out a lot of background and information that is contained in the trees. So what I would say is just, as just a simple thing, just go out and sit with the tree as you would any other individual, a person, right? And literally just open your heart to connecting to anything and everything that that tree wants to send you, teach you, show you, make you feel, whatever it is. That would be my number one piece of advice to anybody that's interested in a druid background. And like I said, I am working on putting a number of different things together to kind of like assist people in like turning what I'm learning into some sort of like a process, classes, coaching. I don't know. There's just so many words out there nowadays. Basically, like if people feel called, I want people to be able to kind of like share in a certain aspect of what I'm learning. And then to kind of rewind back into your other question, entheogens. That's basically, unless you want to add something, that's what I have in terms of the druid thing.
There's not too much more than I want to add, but I certainly know that I've come across during research into Celtic Druidic lineages that they certainly had an affinity for gathering in sacred groves of trees, in particular oak trees. I know that that was one particular tree that they held a great affinity for. And it's very, very interesting because where I live, we back onto a creek. And while we're surrounded in a lot of the native trees around here, lots of eucalypt, there are a lot of oak trees that were planted, I can't remember, maybe over 100 years ago, 150 years ago, down by the creek. And it has been really, really interesting tuning in with these oak trees. Some of them are grand, majestic oak trees. And just nothing specific in terms of esoteric knowledge, but just the energetic exchange and allowing me to tap into more of a feeling of importance of connecting back with my Irish Celtic heritage just from spending time with those trees. So it's certainly something that is still cultivating at the moment. So I certainly resonate with what you're saying in terms of connect with the trees, because it's undeniable that a lot of every single nature-based culture had an affinity with all the plants, all the trees, but in particular in this context, yeah, I certainly resonate with those sentiments with the druids and connection to the trees.
Beautiful, yeah. And just nature, of course, as a whole in general. But the trees specifically, like, kind of, as I see it, kind of like unlock the doorway into that sort of background in lineage from what I've been experiencing.
Yeah, entheogens, man. What have you got to say regarding your path and the path of entheogens?
Sure. Well, kind of tying it back into what I was talking about of, say, actually, do I want to go back further than that? I remember, this is an interesting little story. I remember back when I was in sixth grade. And in sixth grade, this is going to be really funny out there for any people that are in the States or whatever that may have been involved in this as well. In the States, and sixth, seventh, eighth grade-ish, depending, certain areas had this class called DARE, okay? And DARE stood for like Drug Abuse Rehabilitation and Education, okay? And in DARE, it was essentially this class where they taught you about drugs. Okay. But they did it in this very interesting way where, they bring in this big box in my class, and on the box is like a board. It's like a glass box, and they have like little like fake examples of all the different drugs. And then they show you videos about like car crashes that alcoholics caused, and just things like this, right? And I remember they handed out this pamphlet, and I opened it up, and they have all the different drugs that they know about at the time, the major ones, it's like marijuana. It, Keep in mind, plants are drugs to them too. I don't really consider plants drugs. For me, plants are sacred entheogens, and that's why I'm getting into this topic, right? But yeah, so marijuana's on there, cocaine, crack, LSD, all these different things, and then I get to mushrooms and DMT. And I specifically remember reading the DMT description, and it says users purport experiences of contact with gods and alien entities. And at this time, by sixth grade, I was already like, my first like powerful esoteric experience was like when I was like 8 or something, right? Like I had already had very like potent kind of spiritual types of experiences. I remember when I was like, I don't know, I think I was like 4, and I was like asking my mom all these in-depth questions about the Bible and Christianity and things of that nature. And there was this one point where, I asked her some sort of question about God, and she, her answer was very like, did not compute for this little like starseed baby, essentially, right? And so that kind of was part of spurring me on this quest to really like understand the nature of our reality. And I read that description, and I just looked at it and I go, I've got to figure out where to get some of that. And
that's great.
It wasn't for many years that I actually had an experience with entheogens after that time. It wasn't until I almost like graduated high school when I started to experiment with mushrooms and other plant medicines and things of that nature. But at that point, it was very just kind of like, I wouldn't say it was recreational, although there was a tinge of that, but it was more kind of like psychonaut type of flavor to it, right? I was just like so wanting to understand. I had like listened to bits and pieces from people like Terence McKenna or Alan Watts or Robert Wasson, and read books like the was a good one in particular, like the Jaguar medicine book by Martin. I can't remember his name, but anyway, I had a familiarity with what shamanism was at that point, at least South American indigenous ayahuasqueros and in healers from the Amazon. And so needless to say, because I could find nothing out about really any Celtic lineages, and I do have a small amount of Native American blood in me, I felt really, really called and resonant to explore that path, right? To understand it, because I was like, okay, well, this feels resonant inside of me. That seems like the most direct connection to ancient indigenous source. Like there's no brokenness to the lineage. These tribes are still living in the same ways that they've been doing for generations. And so that piqued my interest. And then I kept exploring from that point in a way that was more kind of like a psychonaut type variety, in safer, controlled environments and things like that. Sometimes, music festivals and things of that nature. And that opened up a whole interesting topic, which we may or may not want to get into, with seeing the dark side of the music festival culture, which is big in social media right now. I don't know if you've been seeing any of that about. But
certainly have.
Yeah, so there's some stuff going on there, which I was not directly part of, but I was definitely a sort of opened the corner of my third eye, a witness to, which actually caused me to kind of start to run away from that scene in a certain manner. Not run away, but just like, oh, this isn't actually what I thought it was.
Yeah, sure.
But in the same moment, that was actually a beautiful part in my journey, because when I hit that frequency of seeing some of the stuff that was starting to go on in those areas, it caused me to actually just want to exit society altogether, right? And that's when I decided to go into the mountains in Northern California and start doing yoga and detoxing and meditating and really just getting into, just kind of like walking that sort of path and cleaning myself out and just connecting with, different stuff that I was already aware of, but not fully kind of like stepping into that higher vibratory frequency. And that led to my first Kundalini awakening, which was extremely powerful. And I got a direct transmission to go to Peru for December 21st of 2012. And I just kind of magically, through just synchronicities and being guided in different conversations by essentially my higher self, I ended up on the island of the sun for December 21st, 2012, which was an incredibly powerful experience. I worked with a Quero Paco for almost a year after that in outside of the area of Cusco. And that led me to the Amazon jungle. And I had some very potent experiences there with, I worked with something that's called Chunga. I don't know if you're familiar with Chunga, but that was extremely powerful. I was in an entire, I was at this interesting location in the jungle. This is, maybe like 2013, I think, or something, where the entire property, a medicine man had lived there and passed away, and an indigenous man from that area, and he had planted the entire property with ayahuasca vine. And I was in this little hut, me and a good friend of mine, and he shared this Chunga experience with me. And at that point, I had not sat with the vine directly, but because of probably a lot to do with my sensitivity, the vine came to me directly in that experience, just because there was so much of it on the property. And it was an extremely potent experience, and assured me that like working with these medicines was something in my path. It would bring a very high level amount of healing to me. And at that point, I've done I've done a lot of medicine ceremonies. I'm not like the type of person that like wants to get into like a number or be like, because there is actually a lot of kind of like weird energy in the scene around like it. In certain ways, there's certain groups of people that have almost started to look at it as like putting notches in your belt or things like that. You can go to more and more ceremonies and things of that nature. But it was an integral part, going regularly for a while, to opening me up and bringing me a very vast amount of healing. And I'm a huge proponent of people working with these types of medicines in the right environment, with the right people, the right time and place and things of that. But I can't emphasize enough that there are dangers to it as well. And what I mean by that is, as that somebody, that's in these scenes and worked with these medicines, we need to be careful, and people need to be careful with who they work with, in what the situations and conditions which they work with these medicines with, because although somebody initially kind of like awakening to this type of environment might initially be in the state where they would think, oh, well, these are spiritual people, so all of their intentions must be of the utmost of importance. Or if this person is working with the sacred medicine, then their intention must be like of the highest vibration. And I want to, just put it out there that that's not always the case. And I've been personally in experiences where it was not the most fun type of experience either. It's definitely not all love and light, as they say. And that comes in multiple angles. It's like when you get into the real work with these medicines, it's not always easy. You go into intense places and explore intense darkness and traumas and work through those things, and that's why they're powerful. And at the same time, there's also the dark side of the dark side, where there's people out there that are working with these medicines that have negative intentions. So and it's easy to get caught up, if we're not firmly grounded in ourselves or in somebody that we can with somebody that we can really trust. It's easy to kind of get lost in the path working with these medicines too. So just important parts that I always add in when I talk to people about my experiences with it.
Mm. Yeah, well said. And I don't know if I've ever heard that phrase before, and I like it. The dark side of the dark side. That's good.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say on that note is the one thing that I'm really pushing to kind of get into with people that I work with now, and things that I have developing, which is a very big missing part that I saw when I got into different levels of medicine work, is really what happens in regular life after, right? What happens when, because not everybody while there are some people that do medicine ceremonies and work with entheogens kind of like regularly in ceremony
as a spiritual practice. Yeah,
as a spiritual practice, there are many people though that just that only have the ability to maybe go to a dieta, let's say in the Amazon, or even maybe somewhere in the States or other countries, or just have a very powerful experience at a festival, or just in their home by themselves. Maybe they just decide to plunge in and explore where they need to go in their own self. But there's not much out there about when we open up to these spaces, and when we sort of turn the lights on in multidimensionality, in the spiritual realms and things of that nature. It's kind of like walking into, a jungle that you've never been to before, like barefoot or something, with no, you're just kind of like naked, right? And there's all sorts of things that can go on and that can happen. And there's not much out there at this time. The only person I'm aware of doing some good work with this is Laura, who you had on the show. She's getting into this work, and I'm sure there are other people out there, but I'm just saying that it's still kind of very like untapped territory of the kind of like aftercare / like one-on-one work for helping with a framework and getting into integrating those realms and what people understand and what they see into normal life, right? Because that's actually a part of this whole like Aquarian shift as well, in a lot of interesting ways, is those realms which people like you and me may explore in entheogenic states are going to start to, the veil is going to become and is becoming more and more thin as we speak, as we enter the Aquarian age, into where some of the experiences where we've had in lighter doses of medicine are becoming more of a normal day experience for some people, as our genetic systems sort of start to evolve, and as we start to be able to perceive into these other states as more of like as a normal.
Yeah, I've certainly experienced myself that there is an increased level of permeability between, well, within everything that's encapsulated within this waking dimension, between this
Totally.
earthly physical reality and the, what we might just label as the esoteric or the otherworldly. Yeah, no doubt. Also on integration as well, I was going to say, yeah, you bring up a fantastic point, because as Sky and Helm talked about and alluded to on our recent conversation together, there's often this focus on, it's like this, what do we call it? Individual focused or egocentric focus when it comes to integration. Like we're integrating these perhaps rejected or lost or just these aspects of ourselves that we have pushed to the side. We're integrating that back into ourselves to come to a place of individual wholeness. But we have to take into consideration the larger landscape that we are actually integrating into. What is it? What system are we integrating into? And to what level do we want to be a part of that? And what else are we creating as we step back into the world? So it's integration on a much more expansive perspective.
100%. Yeah, it's like, and that's that's a big part of the whole thing too, right? Like I was talking about how the astrology wheel has to do with these different dimensions, right? And if we look at 12D, this is Pisces, this is Piscean, this is Neptune, right? And this is where we get into the imagination, okay? Imagination, dreaming, lucid dreaming. All these are all art. These are all like Neptunian types of themes, right? And that's why the 12D is so important to becoming a co-creator and a multidimensional being. And we also have to be aware that in that, in the artist palette of paints, in the imagination, there are all, there's the whole gamut. Like the imagination isn't necessarily like, oh, let me just only show you the things that are good for you, or whatever, like maybe pleasurable to experience, or something like that. That's like you can literally see anything in those states. So I'm just kind of adding in like what you're saying. It's really important that we are really conscious of what we are kind of pulling back from those places and actually bringing into our reality.
Yep. Well said. I think this is a good place to wrap things up, Thomas.
Ooh.
Before we do, is there anywhere... yeah, for sure. Is there anywhere you want to send people? Any websites, which I'll include in the show notes anyway, but anywhere you want to direct people right now?
First, I'm working on some things right now. Like the main website that I'm working on is interstellar.net, and it's INRSTELR.net. But I'm still working on it. I've kind of got an alternate kind of like Wix site going on in the background, because this work has been so new since February or whatever. So definitely go there and check that out. But like my main thing is telling people right now, just reach out to me directly on like Facebook or something, Thomas Sochowicz on Facebook, and we can interact if you want to connect with me, or chat about anything that I mentioned here on the show today. And soon I'll be having a lot more cool things on that website. There are some blog posts, and I do regularly take all my podcasts and things and add them onto Anchor FM under INRSTELR. So you can check out all that stuff.
Okay, perfect. Well, brother, lastly, just as we opened up the space, I'd love to invite you to share some words in relation to honoring the sacred and also closing up our time together. And I will leave it in your hands to whatever wants to come in to those palms of offering to our space and to the larger community of listeners, whether it's poem, prayer, words of gratitude, any words of wisdom that you might like to leave our listeners with, whatever wants to come through, brother.
E anta ke we na iana we. Iante we ne kana we ana. Wishana wonkada we are. I just want to presence that we are in a very, very potent and powerful time here on this planet. And if you are watching this episode, then there's a very high level reason that you've been felt called to this information from Kai, this information from myself, and just know that we are all co-creators in this, and that you can feel confident in the direction that the evolution on this planet is happening right now is in the benefit of all beings. It is in a benevolent direction, and that we are on the cusp of a transformation that is very beautiful, is very amazing. There's so much love and support available to you and for you in this transition if you just simply honestly and innately open up and ask for that connection and that beauty and that awareness that there is love and hope present in this moment, and that we are on this very important cusp, and we are actually all in this together, despite that it may seem like there's so much division. At the end of the day, we are all in this together because we are all here present on this planet, and the intelligence that is present in this planet is so incredibly vast and beyond what a lot of us can even understand. And she is with us, and she is taking care of us all. So trust in that. And I just want to give a powerful presence to the Mother Earth, to Gaia, to Sophia, and to any and all beings that are really here to assist us in this transition at this time. I want to thank any and all of them that are here. And I want to thank each and every individual that came to listen to this video, to this podcast today. You are special, you are loved, and I'm so honored to be part of this podcast and to be here with each and every one of you. So thank you so much. Aho.
Aho, brother. Wise and beautiful words to finish up our dialogue. Thanks again for joining me, mate.
Thank you so much, and have a beautiful evening. And I will be in contact afterwards. I want to connect with you about a couple things separate of the podcast as well.